It's a good bounce back win for us today. I thought we started the game with the right tone on the defensive end. And so that was that was by design for us to get.
Initially, no one was aware of what had not occurred. There was silence instead of a statement, an announcement, or a spectacular farewell interview. Caitlin Clark ceased to appear. And that quiet was more powerful than any headline in a world where athletes compete for every bit of global recognition. Fans believed for months that this was only a transitory situation, that ultimately the tension would subside, the egos would settle, and Team USA would make way for the most exciting athlete the sport had seen in decades. That time never arrived. Because of what transpired behind closed doors, the relationship was destroyed rather than just strained. Additionally, Clark's decision becomes inevitable rather than emotional once you comprehend what transpired inside that gym. However, the narrative doesn't start with her leaving. The fresh start that subtly revealed she was never really welcome is where it all started. The offer appeared to be a step forward, a private training camp, a chance to start over, and a chance to show that she belonged. However, the message was clear and urgent inside the gym. Clark was not being assessed. During crucial scrimmage periods, she was being controlled. She wasn't given the opportunity to produce. No rhythmic touches were administered to her. She wasn't even considered a top choice. Rather, she was parked, employed as a spacing device, and made into a decoy when sets passed through veterans who had already reached the end of their prime. It wasn't subtle. Removing the ball from a scorer's hands is not a strategy in basketball. It's a declaration. The statement was unambiguous. Either you will change or you will vanish. Witnesses recounted instances in which Clark demanded activities throughout her career, only to have them dismissed. Ignored are cuts. Screens left unattended. The offense's intentional movement away from her. It has nothing to do with errors. It has nothing to do with defense. It has nothing to do with fit. It had to do with hierarchy. Additionally, Clark reportedly received little assistance when she attempted to comprehend her responsibilities. It wasn't criticism. Distance was the issue. A professional, icy dismissal that gave her all the information she required. For minutes, this was not a contest. It was a low-key relegation. Furthermore, teammates were not the source of that message. It originated at the top, and everything changed as soon as the coach spoke. In practice, the tension didn't blow up. The tone spilt out. The media received a lackluster answer when they inquired about incorporating young celebrities. It was not inquisitiveness. It was self-control. Carefully selected phrases concerning structure, chemistry, and securing your position. It sounded fine on the surface, but anyone listening would recognize it. The Olympic snub has previously been justified using the same rhetoric. And now it was being rehashed, specifically targeting the sport's most talked-about player. She was producing in a new way, not because she wasn't producing. Clark stands for freedom, deep range, volume, and pace. The system she entered is a symbol of hierarchy, control, and accuracy. This disagreement had nothing to do with basketball. There was a philosophical argument. The coach believes that Clark's game is disorganized. Risky passes, defensive gomlas, and deep pull dash-ups. It appears as a liability to a conventional system, but its gravity to everyone else. Defenders become terrified. Coverage periods. Colleagues are given unprecedented space. Her presence causes entire crimes to change. That's influence, not carelessness. Furthermore, influence poses a threat to an obedient system. Because the balance of power changes when a 22-year-old becomes the focus of attention. The playbook isn't holy anymore. The coach isn't the primary character anymore. And no one wants to say that out loud. Fitting Clark into Team USA was not the goal of this. It has to do with Team USA's refusal to accommodate Clark. The sideline conveyed a constant message. Even if the system is becoming less relevant, it always comes first. Even if they are watching on behalf of someone else. Additionally, Clark was quietly taking in something far more significant while fans argued over lineups and rotations. She wasn't competing for a part. They were putting up with her. The real surprise, though, was her response. Because she did something that rocked the entire program rather than publicly retaliating. No dramatic quote, news announcement, or mysterious social media post were present. Caitlin Clark just stopped talking. Future minicamp invitations went unanswered. Discussions came to a halt. The typical exchange between the program and the player vanished. And there was no uncertainty in that silence. It was lucidity. Clark didn't have to declare that she was finished. The choice had already been made. She had no intention of pleading for physical contact. She was not going to comply in order to get respect. Furthermore, she refused to give up her off-season for a program that had already made up its mind. This was a non-theatrical power move. She turned the story around by quietly leaving. There was only absence, no meltdown to criticize, no attitude to analyze, and no opportunity for detractors to use it as a weapon. And fear arises from absence. That dread quickly spread throughout USA basketball since they had to face an unfamiliar reality for the first time. The Olympic dream was not what Clark was after. She was opting for leverage, serenity, and concentration. Clark focused her energies on the league that truly recognized her presence, training, recuperation, and brand building, the things that don't need permission, while Team USA struggled to keep up the appearance of stability. She had come to a decision. Not many players ever do. She was not in need of them. And after that insight permeated the building, the issue was no longer limited to basketball. It has to do with financial visibility. And what happens if the sport's biggest attraction chooses to completely leave the system because the outcome wasn't disappointing? It was a panic. The phone began ringing as soon as Clark moved away. Executives, not fans. USA Basketball is aware of the numbers. They've looked at the charts. They are aware of the differences in viewing between when Clark is on the floor and when she isn't. There is a noticeable uptick. It is a historic event. Her gravity has been used to reconstruct entire broadcasts. And now gravity was vanished. Lineups and rotations were not the issue behind the scenes. It has to do with leverage. A future focused on star power rather than doctrine had been funded by media partners. Sponsors had made investments in visibility rather than ideals. And the future that everyone was trying to sell. Caitlin Clark was in the middle of it. The 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles were meant to be a coronation. Prime-time coverage of home turf. The sport is becoming more popular thanks to a new generation. Every forecast made the assumption that Clark would be there, grinning, shooting from the logo and enticing casual viewers to watch the women's game. The vision falls apart without her. Executives are aware of reality. They are aware that a national team without its most recognizable member poses more than simply a risk to competition. It's a huge financial one. And the pressure started there. Sponsors keep quiet in public. They mumble. They pose inquiries. They show worry. They are looking for clarity. And one awkward subject began to come up in those discussions. Was the program undermining its own future or defending tradition? Because this didn't seem like discipline from the outside. It appeared to be self-destruction. However, the locker room faced an equally hazardous situation as the boardroom was experiencing the heat separation. What happens if the sports face is frozen out? Everyone is aware of it. The atmosphere within the locker room changed. Compliance was seen as survival by veterans who had endured the same regime. They had found success with the system, so challenging it seemed pointless and dangerous. However, the younger guys had a very different perspective. They witnessed the consequences of genius endangering order. It became risky to publicly support Clark. Silence became a tactic. No one desired to be the next. Under the pretense of fit or chemistry, nobody wants their function to be subtly diminished. A setting like that doesn't foster trust. It instills terror. Players started becoming cautious. Discussions ceased to feel sincere. Every conversation felt watched. The program's purported cohesiveness began to crumble under its own weight. Clark sensed it as well. Fighting a coach is one thing. Feeling alone by design is a different matter. It wasn't treachery when there was no outspoken support. It was survival. However, that didn't lessen the pain. Because something is seriously damaged when a player of Clark's caliber feels isolated in a room full of teammates. There was no longer any disagreement. It was a cultural issue. Additionally, a darker hypothesis started to circulate among analysts and insiders as the gap between the old guard and the new period grew. What if this wasn't a coincidence? What if the purpose was to cause discomfort? The benching initially appeared to be obstinate coaching. Then it began to appear intentional. Analysts started making difficult-to-ignore connections. The clumsy turns, the way the ball was kept out of Clark's hands, and the abrupt focus on system basketball whenever her name was spoken. Since it would have been disastrous to cut Caitlin Clark outright, none of it felt unintentional. Backlash, constant headlines, and an uncontrollable PR firestorm would have resulted from it. However, everything would be different if she decided to go. The story abruptly changes. The organization doesn't appear to be exclusive. The player appears disinterested. Without ever making a formal decision, the responsibilities are silently transferred. This is the reason this hypothesis was so disturbing. It's possible that the software was encouraging Clark to leave without actually pushing her through the door by making the space feel chilly, inflexible, and unwelcoming. And if that was the plan, it was a complete failure. Clark appeared calm, competent, and calculated rather than someone who couldn't manage pressure. Fans failed to see a diva. They observed self-control. They witnessed a player defending her tranquilly. Additionally, once public opinion solidified, there was no going back. Her talent wasn't being contested on social media. That disagreement had ended. Leadership, ego, and whether the program was out of step with the current game became the main topics of discussion. Since the truth is straightforward. The world's most dangerous scorer is not accidentally neutralized. You don't consistently ignore your greatest attraction without realizing the repercussions. Fans' sympathy swung sharply in one direction as soon as they noticed the trend. Clark didn't appear to be pushed out. She appeared to be shoved aside. And that insight revealed something that the program was unable to acknowledge. The balance of power had permanently shifted. Team USA was never ready for this part. The national program had all the power for decades. You followed their guidelines if you wanted professional validation, legacy points, and international recognition. The summit was the Olympics. Everything else was incidental. There is no longer a world like that. The evidence is Caitlin Clark. She had already created something greater than the system itself before ever donning a Team USA sweater. Record-breaking ratings, sold-out venues, signature partnerships, and a devoted following, not a logo. She's not looking for attention. The exposure is her. Cameras follow her every time she sets foot on a WNBA court. Each deep pull-up turns into a highlight. Every away game becomes a home crowd. International certification is not necessary for that type of gravity. The equation was altered as a result. The Olympics would be an added bonus rather than a requirement. Clark came to the realization that she didn't have to jeopardize her physical, rhythmic, or mental well-being in order to be managed by a program that viewed her as a problem, particularly when new opportunities were starting to present themselves. Leagues that provide genuine respect, real money, and real equity. Why give up your off-season for nothing in a setting that intentionally stifles your uniqueness? This was not sentimental. It made sense. She may use that time to improve her physique, hone her skills, develop her brand, and play in environments that encourage rather than stifle her creativity. And Team USA was smacked hard in the gut by that realization. Because the leverage vanishes once a player achieves this degree of independence. Relevance cannot be threatened when the player already has it. Despite her anger, Clark remained seated at the table. The table stopped matching, so she left. And that raises a scary question for the program. What prevents the next major star from leaving the sport if the largest star may do so without facing any repercussions? Every period concludes in the same manner. Denial, not a collapse.